Hey friends, it's Abigail Luvisi. Welcome back to Judgment Free Zone. We need vulnerability and empathy now more than ever. I hope you are able to find room for more curiosity, self-compassion, and empathy for yourself and others while you're here. I show up so you can too. Welcome back, guys. I am so excited today. I have Molly from Molly Kate Wellness. Molly's a body image expert and coach. She teaches you how to see your worth beyond size and feel confident being your authentic self. She also hosts a podcast, which she graciously had me on recently. I'm so excited. It was a blast.
So much fun.
It was such a good time. I feel so honored. You were like my first real podcast guest. And now you get to be one of mine.
That.
It's great.
Yay.
Her podcast is called What She Gained. So welcome, Molly.
Thanks for having me. Super excited to chat again about, what I love to jam on, which is intuitive eating and body image. So excited to get into it.
Yes, me too. It's just so cool. Like this whole like Instagram world and like finding people, like I just immediately was attracted to you and like what you have to do and say and who you are. Like you're just so fun. I love how you make something. I was even, preparing for the podcast and I was looking through like a lot of your videos, which is funny because I was watching you for so long before I really, even thought about talking to you.
Yeah.
And I had like already liked all of your videos from your past, but you're just so fun. I love your like creative outlook on body image, which can be such a hard topic.
Yeah, so challenging. We got to have fun along the way. I think that's something that a lot of people think about, like when we do this self-improvement work, like we have to be in it and we're really focusing on it. But if you're not also having fun and enjoying yourself and your life along the way, like I don't want to say you're doing it wrong, but like why don't you add that in? Like we need to be enjoying our lives. So
yeah, well, they say joy is the most vulnerable emotion.
Yep.
So it can be really difficult to have fun when you feel like you're in it, but it is so important.
So important because we're only here in this physical space of this world. At least I don't know what's beyond it.
Me either.
Who knows, right?
Who knows?
But we're only here for a short period of time, and I certainly don't want to spend the rest of my life or even a year of my life so focused on improving myself, quote unquote, that I forget to enjoy the life that I'm actually living.
And I can say for a fact that I still can get stuck in that mindset, and I know so many women. Men, all of us struggle with our body image.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Gosh. It's hard. Well, I'm excited to dive into all that. I asked all my guests one question of what is one of their gifts of them?
Yeah, I love this. And this has been, it's currently a part of my work. I do this with my clients, like what are our core gifts? But over the years of like having to turn it in on myself, I've learned that one of my biggest gifts is seeing the humanity in people and then seeing that as beautiful. So like really seeing the beauty in the complexity of each human being and making that come out. Like I can easily meet someone real quick and then I think they're the most beautiful person ever because I see their flaws, I see their strengths, I see their complexity and their depth and their curiosity. And humanity just fascinates me. People just fascinate me. And so I notice this gift in many ways. First of all, when I do the gifts work with my clients, it's easy for me to see their gifts and pull it out for them. So that's like a gift in my work. But I also have done photography on the side as a little side gig for a really long time. And I noticed that I was taking, like, people would be like, oh, like, I'm not good at pictures. And I would pull out this side of their personality that was just able to be captured in a photo. And they would be like, oh my God, I love this picture. And so it's cool to see how this gift comes out in different areas of my life. And I love this gift about myself because I, for the longest time, didn't see my own humanity and didn't see my own goodness in that, like, all the, dark parts of me are also good, right? Like they make me whole. And so I love this part of me that can see it within myself and also others.
No, that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing. It's just a great way to show empathy and self-compassion for yourself too, and others. Yeah. Which is just so important.
And connection too, because when you can see that in yourself, that you're complex and have depth and all this light and all this dark and all this in between, and then you can see that in someone else, then you realize that we're all connected. We're all different and
Yeah.
unique, and we're all connected.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is like, just like I said, the cool thing that there's a lot of negative to Instagram, but
Yes.
even you and I, like, again, like we
Yep.
never, you're from Chicago, I'm from Arizona. I
Right.
really don't know a ton about you at all.
Right.
But
But
there's
there's a
so many,
connection.
right? But there's a connection and there's so many things that I appreciate about you, and we can
Mhm.
focus on things that we appreciate about each other, or we can dwell on the things that are different about us.
Yep.
And like,
Yep.
why though? Like
Why?
there
Yeah.
is some kind of connection that we can have and enjoy that and find joy in it.
Yes,
Great. So
absolutely.
thanks so
Agree.
much for sharing that. I love
Yeah.
that. So tell us more about you. How did you get
Yeah.
into body image, intuitive eating, all the things, and anything else you want to share about us? Because I want to learn more about you too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh gosh, which version and parts of my story do I want to tell? So
I
I'll first
know.
start with like before, the actual story of how I got into intuitive eating and body image. You should know that I am a lifelong perfectionist, people pleaser. That was just my energy from a really young age. I was always trying
Yeah.
to be perfect and trying to perform and trying to receive approval and love that way.
Yeah.
So knowing that that's kind of the core foundation, right? And the thing is I was pretty good at it too. So it worked for me for a while until it
Mhm.
didn't.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
Yep, yep. So in terms of intuitive eating and body image, how I got there. So my journey with intuitive eating actually started with some digestive distress. I was having some stomach problems. I ultimately got diagnosed with IBS. And so it honestly started with like an innocent desire to feel better, right? I was really crampy. I was really gassy. And at the time I was in college. And so I'm sitting in classes and trying to like hold in my gas. And this was just not
Yeah.
comfortable, right? That's
Yeah.
a lot of information, but we're
No, I
sharing
like
it all
it.
here today.
Yeah, that's what we do
So,
here.
right, right.
We talk about
So
it all.
I honestly was just wanted to feel better. So I went to the doctor. I got the diagnosis. They gave me some medication. I think it was a antispasmodic for your colon, which worked. But I also had other side effects from that. I had headaches, I had restlessness, and I was like, okay, well, this isn't good either. So I set off to kind of try to quote unquote fix my IBS with changing my food. And so that's when I started to restrict things from my diet. And again, started with a really innocent desire to just feel better. But what happened because of the people pleasing, because of the perfectionism, none of it completely fixed it. So I really fell into this habit of removing more and more and more and more. And then that coupled with when I was in grad school, I had like a true quarter life crisis after years of building up this performance, this image of who I was and what my life looked like, it kind of started to crumble around me.
Mhm.
So I was having some family problems with my parents. I had started dating a guy who we were planning on getting married. We had talked about what ring we were going to get.
Wow.
And he was just like, I'm out, basically just left without. And I tried, I like put in effort to like, okay, let's see how we can fix whatever's going on. He was just like, nope, peace out. I
So sad.
also was getting my master's in the same thing that my undergrad was in, which was athletic training. That was my original career path. And I was like, oh shit, I don't want to do this anymore. So my career, my love life, my family crumbling around me.
Yeah.
So because everything felt so out of my control at that point, I was like, I need something to control. This was, of course, all subconscious. I wasn't consciously thinking this, but this is what
Yeah.
happened. And now looking back, I can say, okay, I know what that was about.
Yeah.
So I thought that if I could just lose a couple more pounds, that everything would get better. I literally believed that losing 2 to 3 pounds, because at the time I was much smaller than I am now because of all the restriction. Um, I thought that everything would get better. I literally thought everything would snap and fall into place, and everybody would think that I was quote unquote good, I was fine, and that I had my shit together, right? Because
Right.
everybody who has a smaller body and, is lean and fit obviously has all of their shit together.
Right.
At least that's what society tells us. So that is
Right.
not the truth. But what happened was I was already in about the smallest body size my body could probably even handle. So I was restricting
Mm.
my calories even more. Then I would binge at night because I wasn't giving my body enough fuel. I was very active at the time. I was a half marathon runner. I was an athletic trainer, so I was on my feet all day, and I was riding my bike to work. So the energy need that I had at that time was probably at least twice as much as what I was feeding myself. So of course, your body's going to be like, "Hey, feed me." So I
Right.
would binge at night, I would sneak food, and then I would feel
Mm.
really shitty about myself and tell myself tomorrow's going to be better. I'm going to be stricter. I'm going to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, the control and release phase just
Oh,
oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I've never heard it described that way, but that's
Yeah.
exactly what it was. Controlling, controlling, controlling all day, then releasing at night.
Yeah.
And honestly, it was just like my body needed food, right?
Mm.
And so I remember being in this cycle, being so frustrated that my body wasn't losing weight, I wasn't getting smaller. And I remember talking to a friend, and it took a couple of times. And looking back, I'm like, oh my gosh, Molly, that was such like poor form. My one of my best friends had struggled with an eating disorder. And here I am talking to her about how I'm trying to lose weight and restrict
Mm.
calories. But luckily she had healed from the eating disorder at that time. And she had to tell me a couple times, like, hey, Molly, this sounds really disordered. I really
Mm.
encourage you to just like think about what's going on. The first time I was like, ah, no, I'm just being healthy.
Yep.
And the second time she told me, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, oh shit. If I don't already have an eating disorder, I clearly have disordered eating and body dysmorphia and self hate. And so I just remember like going home and first of all, just like crying to all my roommates. They were all just like, oh God, what's happening? But I knew intuitively in that moment, after all of that restriction, that I needed to give myself permission to eat. I had no idea what intuitive eating was at the time. I had no guidance. I was just like, I just intuitively felt in my body, you need to give yourself permission to eat. So I did that. But then what happened? I gained weight and I didn't like that, right? I got really uncomfortable that I was gaining weight. And then I fell into a even more insidious and sneaky version of disordered eating. I
Mm.
was like, okay, I know I can no longer restrict my calories because that's not healthy for me. So I'm just going to eat clean. So that lasted even longer. That was like probably 5 years of getting deeper and deeper and deeper into quote unquote clean eating. I was paleo. I removed, God, I swear to God, at some point, the only things I felt comfortable eating were like zucchini and romaine freaking lettuce. Like
Oh,
it was such a small amount of foods that I felt like I could eat. Um, and part of that was still my digestive problems. So I remember, so I got a health coaching certification with, because during that time, everyone decided that I was this, health goddess. And I got a lot of validation from that. Everyone was
right.
like, oh, Molly's so healthy. How do you have that self control? X,
Well,
Y,
just
and Z.
hitting your perfectionism, right? Like just
Yes,
getting it. You're
yes.
like,
Just hitting the
yes.
button, filling up that
Mm-hmm.
jar, making me feel like I was on top of the world. But still, I was really internally struggling. And so I remember getting my health coaching certification, starting to take on clients who wanted to be healthier. Even then, I wasn't super focused on weight loss because I remember that was so dangerous for me. But it was more about how can I be healthy and stop these cravings and control what I'm eating. But luckily, in the health coaching space, I was introduced to intuitive eating somehow, some way. I honestly don't even remember how it kind of fell into my lap. But everything in that moment also clicked. I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I need for myself. And this is what I want to end up coaching for other people. And so in that moment, everything changed. I did it for myself. I gave myself permission again, but now I had the guidance of the intuitive eating principles. And there was a whole community of people doing it. And so I felt supported in that way more than I had before. And then once I felt comfortable in my intuitive eating practice, I started coaching other women on it. And then what I found was happening when I was coaching women on intuitive eating was we would peel back the layer of food, and what we would find underneath is really it's how we feel about our bodies. And even deeper to that, we peel back that layer, and below that is really how we feel about ourselves and the compassion we can have towards ourselves. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the long version of my story of how I got here, still a recovering perfectionist, still working through some of those people pleasing tendencies, but honestly intuitive eating and accepting my body and reconnecting with my body on a deeper level has absolutely changed my life.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing all of that. I loved the long story. I appreciate it. I mean, I know so many women can completely relate to what you're saying. Like, I mean, our stories are different, but the way, again, the peel back part, I am like, oh yeah, like that part, I'm right
Mhm.
there with you. Recovering perfectionist didn't work out for me ever. Like
Yep.
I was the opposite. It was like, I just can't seem to get it, which again feeds the perfectionism of like, I'm not
Yep.
enough. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
I can totally relate to that. I mean, I can't even tell you how many diets I've been on in the past. And,
Yep.
just going into also like when you said that you found intuitive eating, and then I felt like I heard you say too, there was a point where you were like, I'll just eat anything. So, one, I do want first, I have a couple thoughts. Um, Explain what intuitive eating is first, and then maybe I'll ask my next question if I remember
Yeah. Yeah.
it by that point.
Absolutely. Yeah. So intuitive eating, kind of the simple definition, is a non-diet approach to health and wellness. So it really is a approach to your health, but what it utilizes instead of rules and restrictions is attunement to your body. So checking in with, what do I feel like eating? Am I full? And when am I hungry? And really tuning back into your body, because our bodies are so wide. So it's a non-diet approach to health and wellness that uses reattunement with your body as kind of the general flexible guidelines.
Yes. Okay. So with that, I know that, you know, that was a really new term even to me up until like
Mm-hmm.
4 years ago. And I remember I came across it because I did keto, and I came across it because Tiffany Rose stuff came up on my feed. It was probably like 5 years ago. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh. And so I started reading, she suggested that book, Intuitive Eating.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started reading the book, and I was so thankful that the book also said, like halfway through, like this, it got to a point where it was talking about like healthier food choices. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, I can't. That sounds like a lot. And I
Yeah.
remember the book, I was thankful because they said, this might be a lot for you. Like, it's okay if you need to stop and pause.
Yep.
And I'm not going to lie to you, I haven't gone back since.
Mm-hmm.
So this
Yeah.
was my next point, is that I remember you saying that, you felt there was a point where you just like ate everything. And you've read the
Yep.
intuitive eating book.
Mm-hmm.
There's a
Yep.
point where it says, like you have to let go,
Yep.
and, you have to give that. And I've done that, and I gained weight, and I have gained weight too. And I'm trying again, the whole like self-compassion thing, but just for others to hear too. I want to be also vulnerable with my own
Yep.
things that I'm going through. How do you like where do you go? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
others like how do you find that balance of like giving, non-restrictive and also having compassion in that?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. So the first few principles of intuitive eating are to reject diet culture and then to let go of restriction and allow yourself to eat the foods that you want to eat. And what typically happens is, because you've been restricting things that you've been desiring for so long, things that bring you pleasure and satisfaction in eating, which is totally normal to have pleasure and satisfaction in eating, is we want to eat all those things. I
Right.
literally will never forget the specific chocolate hazelnut bar from Trader Joe's that I would eat 24/7 when I first gave myself permission to eat. This was in the first round when I didn't know what
Mhm.
intuitive eating was. Now I'm so burnt out on that chocolate bar, I have not touched it, because I'm just like, I still love chocolate, but I'm like,
Right.
please don't give me that. Like, I don't ever want to eat that again because I burnt myself out on it. But so part of the reason why we have to give ourselves permission is we have to reestablish trust between ourselves and our bodies. It's just like any other relationship. If there is a breach of trust or a rupture in the relationship, you have to repair it. Right. So
Mhm.
we have to repair that same relationship with our bodies. And what has happened, if you've been dieting for a long time or restricting, is that's a rupture. That is, your body's no longer trusting you because it's giving you these signals. Hey, I need to eat more. Or, hey, if I'm keto, like, hey, please give me carbs. Right.
Right.
We're not listening to it. That breaks the trust. And so over time, when we give ourselves permission to eat, it's still taking our body some time to trust that we will not restrict it again,
Mhm.
because our body doesn't really know the difference between a diet and a famine, right? It's just like, okay, I'm noticing that I'm not getting as much energy, so let me, turn down my metabolism so we're not burning so much. Let me store more energy so that just in case we have a famine again.
Mm,
So it keeps track, right? It's like,
right.
okay, I've noticed that there's this pattern of we go in a famine and then we binge, binge, binge. That probably means then that there's a famine coming. So
Yeah.
it needs to start seeing a consistent, steady flow of energy before it's like, oh, okay, I think we're good. We can rev up that metabolism again. We can stop storing so much energy. And this isn't to say that, like, I'm not trying to say that like eventually you'll lose weight because your metabolism will go up. It's just more about your body trusting you and getting into a healthy place for your body. So that phase where you're refeeding it, we sometimes call that refeeding, is really just you reestablishing trust with your body. And then the next step is kind of fine tuning that, just like you would with a relationship, right? You probably notice the nuances with your husband in communication. He
Mhm.
probably notices them within you,
Yep.
and maybe you're even learning them about yourself. So you're really fine tuning the relationship, and you'll do the same thing with your body in terms of attunement. So even little things like noticing your hunger cues before you get stomach hungry, right? We all know what it feels like to be
Mm,
hungry in our stomach, but what are
yeah.
some of your hunger cues before that happens? Because sometimes if we wait that long, then we've waited too long.
Right.
So
Then we
for
get like
me,
ravenous and
yeah,
just
exactly.
binge.
Yes, yes. We call that primal hunger. Now we've
Mhm.
waited too long. Our body automatically wants to eat more than we probably need because it needs to feel safe and it needs to be nourished. So for me, some of my first hunger cues are I start to get distracted and I start thinking about food, even before I start to feel that like physical stomach hunger, right? So it's really attuning with your body over time. And then eventually, once you've given it full permission to eat, you've reestablished that trust, you've noticed the nuances. Now that's when you can reintroduce what they call an intuitive eating, gentle nutrition. And that's more of the physical aspect. You also want to make sure that you feel comfortable around food. You feel confident that you can eat what you want, leave what you don't, stop when you feel like stopping, and also eat food just for pleasure and enjoyment and feel okay with that, right? So that's
Yeah.
more of the emotional aspect. So those things have to be really in place and pretty solid before gentle nutrition can come easily.
Yeah.
So gentle nutrition looks like, adding things back in that you enjoy, right? So adding back in fruits and vegetables that you still find pleasure in, finding ways to make those taste even better for you,
Mm,
building a little bit more of a balanced plate. So can we add a little bit more fiber or protein or, whatever you feel like isn't as balanced as it could be. And this is for true health purposes, to feel sustained and nourished and feel good in your body.
mhm.
It's not to manipulate or change the size or shape of your body. And with
Yeah.
that being said, I also want to add that there is no moral value to health. If health is not a value of yours, that's okay. I am not here to judge you. Other people probably will judge you, and that's on them and not on you. There's nothing
Mhm.
moral about health. A lot of people will turn it that way. It's called healthism. But I always like to make sure I validate, like, if you don't value health, you're just as good of a person as me or Abigail.
I
It
love
doesn't
that.
make you better or worse than anybody if you don't value health, and that's okay.
Exactly. No, I love that you said that. Do you, this is a little bit more random, but do you do any breath work or body work?
So breath work, not as much. The body work that I do, one of my things that I do all the time is a lot of somatics. Like when I feel emotions getting into my body, holding space for that, creating space for emotions, the physical sensations of them in my
Mm,
body. That's kind of the most body work that I do. And I kind of ebb and flow out of other types of body work and somatics for myself. I did a lot of like intuitive dance before. I would literally
mhm.
just close my eyes and let my body do whatever it wanted. And right now I'm doing a lot more like subconscious, almost a little hypnosis-y kind of
Mhm.
meditation.
Yeah.
It's kind of in between like EMDR and
Mhm.
hypnosis and meditation kind of combo.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah.
love that. I was just asking because I just started doing some breath work and body work sessions aside from my therapist. And she just told me, and I just, because I'm not a science guru at all or know pretty much anything about the body. I could tell you a lot about the brain.
Yeah.
But I
It's
just
part of
thought
the
it was
body.
right. You got the body, or I
Yeah.
at least have the feelings. I can go that
Yeah.
far.
Yeah.
But it was so interesting because she told me that your brain can only send one neuron to the body, but the body sends up 10.
Oh, interesting. I didn't
So
know that.
being able to connect with your body and just like, what you're saying, like really when that relationship is disconnected and your
Mhm.
brain is taking over and we easily go into limbic and like that
Yep.
fight, flight, or freeze, when
Yep.
we're allowing that to happen, how can we listen to the body? But when we are able to just take 5 minutes, the neurons that are like, it's so like it's repairing so much. And I just thought that
Uh,
that was crazy to learn.
I love that. And it makes me think about, I hear this all the time from clients, is that I know cognitively in my head that it's okay to gain weight. I know cognitively that I should be able to accept myself in any body, but it
Right.
doesn't feel true to me emotionally and in my body. So I often talk about like when we can get into our bodies, that's going to kind of reconnect that highway between the two. So I didn't know that statistic, but I guess I kind of knew intuitively that there's
Yeah.
something to that.
Right. Well, we're constantly, and I know we talked a little bit on yours too, but we're constantly, if we can't trust ourselves, how can we
Mhm.
trust it? It affects
Yep.
every part of our lives,
Every part. Yep.
and when culture is constantly coming at us with, what skinny or healthy is or not healthy,
Yep.
like how can we trust what our body is saying when the world is telling us something else?
Yep. Absolutely. I talk about that a lot. I mean, society has all these standards and we walk away from ourselves and towards those things, those values. And when we try to align with society's values instead of aligning with ourselves, that's part of the reason why dieting and we don't feel good in our bodies is because we haven't been listening to ourselves. We've been
Yeah.
trying to align with something that's completely outside of ourselves. And when we can realign with ourselves and start listening to ourselves and trusting ourselves, that's why we can start to feel better in our bodies, even if our body's in a larger size than we would like, because we're trusting ourselves, we're aligned with ourselves, we're congruent with our authenticity, and that feels different.
Right. Well, and I just know, I just want to, I guess, openly say to people that it takes time
Oh,
and
yes.
so much patience and self compassion because, if people out there, which I know there are a lot of people out there who were raised in trauma filled homes or even like little t
Yeah.
traumas, when
Yep.
you're taught from a young age to not trust yourself or you're constantly being told what to do, again, it all flows and feeds into one another.
Yep.
So this could be somebody's first step of realizing that there's just that core,
Mhm.
going on, something deep that's there. And
Yep.
it takes time to like
Yep.
relearn to trust yourself and all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that this takes work and time, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're
Hmm.
doing it wrong. Even for me, I'll share that, yeah, I've done all this healing around food and body, but my self-worth has nestled itself somewhere else, right?
Right.
It was in food and body, and I healed a lot of that, but I didn't heal the deeper part of my self-worth. And now it's nestled itself into business and money and that kind of stuff. And so
Mm,
now I'm having to
yeah.
do that work. And now I'm realizing that if I don't do that deep subconscious work, like I was talking about, it's going to continue to do that. It's just going to go nestle into
Right.
the next area. So now I'm not only having to do the work around my mindset around money and business, but I'm like, okay, I have to go deeper. I have to do this subconscious work because I clearly haven't actually healed my self-worth wounds. And so that's kind
Yeah.
of where I'm at, to share
Mm,
with everybody that like this work doesn't really end. And I see that as like I get to keep doing this work now.
mhm.
I think if I had heard that like 10 years ago and I was a perfectionist, I would have been like, this work never ends. Like there's no end point to this. I would have been like, well,
Mm,
then why the F am I even going to do this if I can't win at it, if I can't be perfect at it, if I can't, get to this point. But now I'm like, oh, this is the point of it, right? Like you never end this work. And also, again, you want to make sure that you're enjoying life along, excuse me, along the way.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And again, I think that goes back to what we were talking about in the beginning of, I think you and I on so many levels do look for the joy. And
Mhm.
I don't know if you can relate, but when I was in that zone before now, where I have done a lot of healing work, it was so hard to be in that joy.
Mhm.
And now
Yeah.
it's such a huge component of both of our business and life, it sounds like. I
Yeah,
know it
that's
is
so
for
true.
me. And so, yes, in the beginning, it felt and looked daunting. And where is the end of the tunnel? And yes, you and I can both see where we both need work,
Mhm.
but we've done so much work now. We also have so much joy.
Yes,
Because I hear you
absolutely.
saying that you have some other things to work on, whereas I've done so much of like the other work that you need to work on that I'm like, I am the body work now. Like I'm
Yeah.
like, okay,
Yeah.
it's like reverse. I'm like, all
Yeah.
right. But it relates so much. It really, really does
Yep.
go hand in hand. Like, I
Mhm.
mean, I remember when you and I had talked about before, way before we even talked about doing podcasts, we, I think, or maybe it was like right along time, that's beside the point, that I was talking about affirmations. And I am such a huge advocate for affirmations, but just sometimes you just have that click with something that you
Yep.
say and you were like, well, is it working? Like, what are you know what I mean? Like whatever you were saying that,
Yeah.
prompting me. And I was like, oh, she's right. Like, why I could say it differently. And it, and just that small thing of you helping me, I was like, oh, and that's why it's so great what you're doing too. I mean, I just want to say, just in that small way, you've helped me so much just in my daily affirmations. And it fed into all other areas. Like even with my kids, like I'm learning. I loved that. I loved when you said, like,
Yeah.
I'm learning to X, Y, and Z. Like that fits so well for me. And I think that
Mhm.
that's so good to share with my kids because, not to go on a complete side note, but that's what I do and I like it. Like with our kids, we look at our kids and we expect them to be adults or to know all of these things, right? And so I just love that instead of telling them, say, like, oh, they have their affirmations, like, I love myself or whatever, like that we have, like, I'm learning because they're kids. I'm
Yeah.
learning and I'm an adult and I'm still learning. And
Yes.
but I enjoy learning.
Totally.
I love learning. So,
And that's probably such a beautiful thing for you to model to your kids too, that like, oh, here's my mom who I trust, I look up to, she is my caretaker, and she can admit that she's learning, and she can show us and be with us and model that it's okay to be in process. I
mm,
think that's going to be so healing for them.
yeah. So, what, like, and I don't know if you know any because I know you don't have kids yet of your own, but resources for people that are just starting to get curious, parents, because it is, I know that it starts with us, right? As
Yep.
parents, it starts with
Mhm.
us and that's how we model. I know it can be difficult modeling too when I'm figuring it out for the kids as well. And so is there any resources you could give me and others on the parenting side and just starting to get curious about this conversation for other people?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't have any like super clear resources off the top of my head. I do think there is this Body Love Society that does talks for kids, but I think they've been
Mm,
paused since the pandemic. But
mhm.
I think the most important thing is to remember, like you said, you model to your kids. And so if you can start doing the work for yourself, it's going to have a ripple effect on
Right.
your children, no matter what. Also, to take some of the pressure off you, they're finding that even outside of the home sometimes is an even bigger influence on kids. I mean, my
I
sister is
know.
really big on making sure that there's not any body talk at home. We're not adding morality to food. We're not commenting on how much or little you ate, those kinds of things. And her kids will still come home and say things that she does not want them to say or think. And it's because they're hearing it from other kids. So, and that's not
Yeah.
to say that like we can't change this or fix this or X, Y, and Z, but I think sometimes parents put a lot of pressure on themselves to, you
Yeah.
know, fix all of these things. So I think the key is to do the work for yourself. That's going to have a huge ripple effect. And then when your kids say things, if you don't have a response ready yet, maybe remember what they said and do some working on like, what would I want to hear if I was that age? Right.
Yeah.
So one thing that I feel called to share is that so often kids will say, oh, this teacher is fat because they heard that from someone, or I'm fat, or X, Y, and Z. And our immediate automatic response is often, oh, no, you're not fat. Don't say that. And so instead, what we want to encourage them to start learning is that fat is not bad. Fat is acceptable. We can love anybody in any body size, and being fat or thin doesn't make one person better than the other. And so I guess that's one little bit of advice that people can kind of walk away with and say, if I notice myself wanting to be like, no, you're not fat, or no, so-and-so is not fat, instead finding a way that's authentic to you to say something along the lines of, fat's not bad. Right. And we love that person, whether they're in a fat body or a thin body, and being fat or thin doesn't make you better or worse.
Right. No, absolutely. And just to add on top of that, with my own parenting, I've realized that even saying, I don't know, I can look and research for it and we could do it together, but really opening that door of knowing that you don't have to have all the answers.
I love
which
that.
just creates that next step of I'm learning too. And it gives them the room to be curious and know that they don't have to know everything as well.
I love that.
And again, this whole diet culture with society, and it's so difficult. And just like you said, they get so much of it at school. I mean, I even, not to put my school on blast, but I had to go to my school, and it sometimes, like, even sharing it right now, like, you go like, wow. Like, I haven't even said it yet, and you're just
and
like,
I know,
and I can already feel it, and I'm like, feel it in my palms and everything. But so the school, they do, I got 4 kids, so hot lunch all day or day, like, sign them up, because I'm not that, all about making all of those meals. So they get hot lunch, and because of COVID and the pandemic, they decided to give everybody free lunch for the year, which cool.
Wow.
So that was like such a blessing. But they started, because they're paying for it, they were having the teachers tell the kids that they had to eat what was on their plate. Yeah, I know. And my daughters, because I don't do that, right? Like, thankfully, because my door is swinging wide open. My daughters came straight home that day, and was like, my teacher told me I had to eat everything on my meal. And of course, I'm like, mama bear. I'm like,
let's go.
I'm like, excuse me. And I was like, what happened? What'd you say? And they're like, well, I just told them I wasn't going to eat it. I was like, okay, good for you. You know what I mean? Like, but it kept happening. And she'd come, and it was like 2 of them, like, really were coming to me and telling me like, hey, like, this teacher's giving me a problem. And I finally, like, sent an email. It was still happening. And I went to the principal. I was like, dude, I don't care if it's just my kids, but you need to stop.
Right.
And the principal even is telling me like, well, we're just trying to encourage them even to eat their carrots. I was like, no, that's not your place.
No, it's not. Oh,
can you believe this?
Wow. That's wild. I feel sorry for the school districts of my future children, because I'm probably going to be just like you and be like, no.
Don't feel sorry though. Like, that's how we have change. Right. You know what I mean? Like, this it's not acceptable.
No,
it's not okay. Like, it's just perpetuating everything that continues to happen. Like, I mean, again, it's the same old saying, like, history repeats itself. Like, this isn't okay. Like, we have to stop it. We have to have conversations, uncomfortable or not. Like, it's okay to be uncomfortable. That's how we change.
Yep. You're right. I ain't sorry.
Yeah. Exactly. Don't be sorry. But for real, like, it's literally the jungle out there. Like, it's it's a safari. Like, I mean, just again, having 4 girls and hearing the things that I'm constantly like, I want to just homeschool them. Like, let's
Yeah.
just keep them safe. But
Yeah.
again, it's like that'll be its own set of problems.
Right.
And so
Yep.
being able to, teach my kids different, hopefully they will go out and do different. And hopefully, again, other parents are going to continue to do that too.
Yep.
And the
Absolutely.
ripple effect, just like you said, will keep going.
Yep.
Oh,
Absolutely. And I think our society
I
is
gotta come
in.
down from
Yeah.
that,
We're up here.
Yeah, anyways.
Let's do some breath work for
I
a
know,
sec.
right?
But no, I do think society is making progress. I
Yeah.
think what we're just going to end up seeing is we're going to end up seeing a lot more. Diet culture is not going to go anywhere. We're just going to also see acceptance culture.
Yeah.
So we're just going to see the duality a little bit more because diet culture ain't going anywhere. And I think acceptance culture is going to grow and expand. So I think it's positive that we
Yeah.
are stepping more and seeing more body acceptance.
Yeah.
But like I said, diet culture ain't going anywhere. So we still are going to have some barriers to break down. But again, it starts with you to work on your own internalized biases. And sure, the fact of the matter is, I always think this is important to bring up, is part of the reason we're so afraid to gain weight is because there is an actual oppressive system called fat phobia, where there's
Yeah.
actual systems in place to make life harder for those that are in large or fat bodies, if you're using fat as a reclaimed word. And so we feel that in our nervous systems. We know that it would be unsafe to be in a larger body, but that's society's fault, not your body's fault. And so
Mhm.
I just want to validate that in our society, it's set up in a way that it is not set up to support people in large or fat bodies. And that's a
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. Again, it's a safari out there. It's Wild Wild
Yep.
West. It's
Yep.
hard. So
Yep.
how do we, I know it's easier, I guess I'll say, for you and I to have this conversation
Yep.
because we're so
Mhm.
open. But
Yep.
how do we, digest that conversation with people? Not a play on words, right? Digest.
I see what you did there.
uh, how do we digest that conversation with people when, they do the holidays, right? Like birthdays, just in general. Like there are sometimes I'm in conversations with people, and this will be helpful for me. I don't know if you can help me, but literally it feels like it's brought up constantly, right?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
it's like almost, and I don't like to use always or never, but almost always does that conversation get brought up
Yep.
with
Yeah.
friends. It's
A
like,
lot.
oh my gosh,
Mhm. Yeah.
so hard.
Oh gosh, there's so many things we could hit on
I know.
here, but I'll keep it tangible. I always encourage people to first focus on yourself in those moments. How are you thinking? How are you reacting?
Mm,
How are you feeling?
mm,
So that you can build a foundation of like, I can modulate my own response to this and feel okay in my own body. Because when we can focus on our internal boundaries and our internal world first, that sets up a really good foundation to when you feel comfortable, set a boundary with those people and say, hey, I'd rather not talk about bodies, on Christmas. Can we talk about X, Y, or Z?
yeah.
And there's so many different ways you can handle that. You can ignore it. You can change the subject. You can
Right.
say, hey, I don't want to talk about bodies, and then change the subject. Or you could have a full on vulnerable conversation and be like, this is something I've been working on for the past year. I totally understand, thinking about food and body, but it was just taking up my life. And I've been doing all this work and I feel so much better.
I love
And the
that.
cool thing is that you get to choose. You could literally, I've done this before, just got up and walked away from a conversation. Harder to do when it's just you and one other person
Yeah.
because you're like, what just happened? But if I am not ready to set an external boundary and I need to take care of myself in that moment, I'm going to get up and walk away, right?
Yeah.
So it could be as simple as that, or it could be as vulnerable as sharing your journey and sharing your thoughts and feelings and calling people in, really. But
Mm,
first and foremost, you need to notice what happens when someone talks about that. What emotion
mm,
pops up? What are some of my automatic thoughts? And how can I kind of again take care of my own internal world before I set these external boundaries? Now, that's not to say if you want to set an external boundary first, go ahead. I am not stopping you. All the more power to you. I've just found for myself and clients, if we can make our nervous system feel safer in those situations, we feel a lot more confident to set those external boundaries.
No, I absolutely love that. And I just like, even as you're talking, I think of situations that have happened because, it's one thing when I deal with it, but it's always 10 times better when my kids are there with me. Like, there have been conversations and that, diet culture and stuff will get brought up or losing weight. And my kids straight up, all four eyes look up at me. How's mom going to react to this? And I'm
I
like,
love that.
how is mom going to react to this right now?
Just take my little kids and we're going to go to the other room.
Walk away. So, it's so good. I love it. Thank you so much. Okay. So I guess we covered a lot, man.
Yeah,
we like went over all of our pinpoints. So
I love it.
Just like went right down, trusting yourself, body image. Okay. Well, I know that you said before we got on, nobody heard, but you're more into body image right now. So just give us a little bit of that.
Yeah. So like I said, what I really found was I was working with people on intuitive eating, and what we ended up talking about was more about how we felt about our bodies, because if we felt comfortable and safe in our bodies, we wouldn't be dieting. Like that would just not happen. We would have a natural, easy relationship with food and we would trust our bodies, right?
Yeah.
But that's not happening. And so a lot of my work focuses on one, noticing what are the things I'm thinking about my body, but using those thoughts as information and kind of asking ourselves these deep questions to follow the thread down to what it's really about.
Mm-hmm.
Because I always say that it's not about your body. Now I'm like, okay, we do live in a physical world. I'm going to leave a little sliver of the pie chart to be reserved to like, okay, it partially is about our bodies, but the great majority, I'm leaving like 0.5% the pie chart to that.
Yeah.
The rest of it is going to be about something else that's important to you. And we follow the thread by asking questions like, if that thought was true, what would that mean about you? And if that was true about you, what's the story you're telling yourself that you won't get anymore? Or what are you telling yourself that if you were smaller, you would get, right? So we ask these questions to get down to the root. And what I'm finding, especially with women, it might be a totally different story with men, but we're really afraid that if we don't look perfect or fit into these boxes or X, Y, and Z, that we're not going to get the connection and belonging that we crave and desire. And the truth is that we're humans. We thrive in relationship. We can survive on our own, but we thrive in relationships. So what I found as this huge trend is that the core of it is that we want authentic, deep connection, whether that's friendship, whether that's family, whether that's romantic. Because if I had $1 for every time I heard someone say, well, if I don't lose weight, I'm not going to find my partner, I would be a millionaire. Right? But that's a real fear in our society. But what I want to offer is, I think your most authentic partner is going to love every single part of you in any size body. And if they only love you conditionally in a smaller body, they aren't your person.
Absolutely. No, I love that and appreciate that so much. It's, it goes down to, again, what I do too, that those core beliefs on our heart that really are just there about what we really do feel about ourselves. Yeah, that was so good. Thank you so much. So I love what you're doing. I want people to come to you. Where can people find you? What are you up to? Anything new? What do you offer?
Yes, my biggest new thing is the podcast, the What She Gained podcast. So you can find What She Gained anywhere you listen to podcasts. But otherwise, you can find me at my website, mollykatewellness.com, and also my Instagram at mollykatewellness. So you can find me there.
Yay. Thank you again so much for coming on.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
I love our newfound friendship and appreciate you so much. You are so amazing.
You as well. If I'm ever in Arizona, you better know I'm hitting you up.
I'm going to hit you up in Chicago too. I've never been, so I need to go.
Oh, nice. Awesome. Love it.
All right. Thank you again. We'll see you guys next time.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, friends, for listening in. If you found this helpful, please subscribe, share, and leave a review. If you'd like to be more involved in our community, hop over to Instagram and find me at Abigail Luvisi. Keep showing up. I will too. See you next time.